Joining us now to discuss is Father Patrick Mary Briscoe, the co-host of the Godsplaining podcast. Father, thank you so much for being with us. First, I just want to get your reaction to this image the president posted and then his explanation.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's a very difficult situation here because, of course, we don't want to see anyone in a dispute with the Pope. The Pope is certainly not out to make enemies, and I think that I can shed some perspective here. Certainly, when I looked at the image as a Catholic priest, it seemed to me that the president had depicted himself as Jesus, and I and many others, not just Catholics, but Protestant Christians alike, denounced the image immediately as sacrilegious. It does appear the president has deleted the image, but I would say even more problematic now is the fact that the president has not offered an apology for the image or an apology for his other marks concerning Pope Leo and the current war in Iran.
To sort of condense for our viewers what happened, the Pope spoke out against armed conflict. The president attacked Pope Leo directly, and I'm paraphrasing, essentially saying that he was put in place by the Vatican as a response to Trump's presidency. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean about people having the framework wrong. You see, the Pope is not a political leader in that way. The Pope is not running for office. He doesn't have to be reelected. The Pope's role is not to craft or endorse specific foreign policy, but he is to advocate for the cause for peace, for human dignity, and especially for the vulnerable, for those who are going to be suffering most for the war. So Pope Leo on the plane today, he's in the middle of an apostolic journey to Africa. Pope Leo on the plane today said that he is not a politician, and he focused his support, his message again on ending the war and presenting himself most importantly as an advocate of the gospel's message. And I think that's the key, to see the Pope and to understand that the Pope is not simply a political rival of the American president. That's not now the case, and it's never been the case. But to hear the Pope as an advocate for human dignity throughout the world, as an advocate for peace, as someone that wants to present and further and advance diplomatic solutions to some very difficult problems. So certainly the Pope would condemn any instances of violations of human dignity in regimes like the regime that had headed Iran. But the Pope understands that a just solution has to be found, a solution that again furthers the cause for peace.
How do you see American Catholics reacting to the president speaking this way about the Pope, given that there are certainly many Americans who may not necessarily like whether this Pope or his predecessor, Pope Francis?
The president of the U.S. Bishops' Conference released a very powerful statement. He said, "I'm disheartened that the president chose to write such disparaging words about the Holy Father. The Holy Father, the Pope Leo, is the vicar of Christ who speaks for the truth of the gospel." And I think most Americans, people of goodwill, see the Pope as that, understand that the Pope is an important moral voice, again, that doesn't have a vested political interest. And I think what we're seeing now, what's different, what's changed now in this situation is Pope Leo is, of course, an American. Again, one thing that adds further context, we can remember the beginning of the Iraq War, and a lot of people were surprised to hear Pope St. John Paul II condemn that war. And what was different in that situation is that President Bush did not attack personally the papacy. Diplomatic conversations continued to happen, and the Vatican continued to advocate for peace through the voice of Pope John Paul II and his successor, Pope Benedict. And again, I think what we're seeing now is the Church's response to what is a breakdown of dignity. In the recent 60 Minutes interview, 3 cardinals were interviewed. It's a very unprecedented thing. And Cardinal Supich from Chicago pointed out that one especially difficult thing is we're seeing a gamification of war. He called it a gamification of war, which makes death and violations of human dignity seem like casual and light things. So it's really the tone and the tenor and the nature of discourse, because it belongs to the Pope to correct all of us, to lead all of us, to help us aspire to greater things, to higher moral agency, right? And it's really the tone and tenor of that discourse now that's shifted. And that's what so many, I think, people are responding to vehemently, both in the image, which again has since been deleted, but the post, which has not.
Yeah. Father Patrick, Mary Briscoe, thank you so much for sharing your perspective. We appreciate you being with us this afternoon.
My joy.